all these things, he talks about what he calls a thorn in his flesh. He talks about these surpassing revelations that he's had, and he says, in order to keep me from becoming conceited or prideful, God's given me this thorn in my flesh. And I want to pick up in chapter 12 at verse 9. He talks about how he pleaded with the Lord to take this thorn in the flesh away. Verse 9 says, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.' Therefore," he says, "I'll boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." Then he goes on to say, and I mean, these are almost unbelievable words. If you weren't a Christian, you would just scratch your head and wonder, what in the world is he talking about? He says, "That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I'm weak, then I'm strong." Wow. I mean, catch this. This is the phrase right here. Weak is the new strong. It's almost like you need to tilt your head with a little swagger, Christian swagger. Weak is the new strong. If you get to grasp what Jesus is teaching here, really it's in weakness that we experience the power of God. So, think about this for just a minute. Everything's falling apart. You're empty. You get to that point where you're tired of pretending, and you just admit, man, I don't have it anymore. I can't go on. It's in that moment, Paul says, in weaknesses and insults and hardships and persecutions and difficulties, when we get to the end of ourselves, that's where the power of God might shine through the most apparently, the most evident. It might be the most brilliant in our life. Sometimes we talk as Christians about this idea of surrendering. And so there are some of us, I'm sure, today that we have expended this unbelievable amount of effort trying to control a situation or maybe even control another person. I mean, we've manipulated the best way we know how. We've made people feel guilty the best way we know how. And we have unbelievable amount of exertion just trying to form this situation or circumstance. And whatever it is, these people are not bending to my will. Some of you have been there before. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. After all the manipulation, guilt, or whatever else, they're still not doing what I want. And at some point, you get to this moment where you realize, you know what? I can't control this situation. I can't control that person. And there's this moment where you just decide, I'm going to surrender. God, I'm not God. I know you're God. I've been trying as hard as I can, but I realize that, there's nothing I can do, and you surrender that to God. And it's at that moment where not only do you finally feel free, burden lifted, but it may be at that moment where, okay, I'm now going to let God be at work instead of Scott at work, that we finally see the power of God shine through in the most brilliant way, right? Now, I've been thinking about these words for a long time because Jesus, he has these teachings. You want to save your life, you got to lose it. You want to be first, you have to be last. You want to be great, you need to be the servant of all. What does this really mean? And as I used to think about it, I think, okay, you know what? I really have got to stop trying to be first. I need to try to be last. I've really got to stop being the kind of person who controls others. And then I had this flash of insight. I don't think Jesus is calling us to exert any force whatsoever or try to become something. He's not asking us to become weak. He's not asking us to become last. He's calling us to admit reality. Once I realize, whoa, it's not that I say, okay, I'm going to stop being the kind of person who's controlling. I can't control things. I'm going to stop being the kind of person who's powerful. I'm not powerful. You know, it's like we admit who we are. There's a way in which, in order to be a Christian, Jesus calls us to stop pretending. You know, here we've got this mask on, we're fine, we're perfect. How are you this morning? Fine. How are you? Great. Take the mask off. This is who I am. I can't control so many things that are out of my control. It's not that I need to become weak. I am weak. And when you get to that moment where you realize that, you know what Jesus calls me to do is just embrace the reality of how things are, it's at that moment where God's grace and power will be seen in all of their brilliance. I think this is at the heart of what it means to be a Christian, and maybe there are some who are here today. You walk through these doors, and the reason you walked through these doors was because God's in control of the events of your life. And he wanted you to be here today so that you could hear that although I'm striving to become something, I'm really just who I am. I'm striving to control that situation, but I can't. And maybe today would be a day where you practice this ancient Christian discipline of surrender, where you'll say to yourself, this is how reality is. I'm a broken, flawed person, and I desperately need God's power. I'm going to stop striving to become, and I am going to embrace the reality of who God made me to be. And if that's you today and you hear God tugging on your heart to surrender, I want to encourage you to do that very thing. To stop pretending that things are okay, to stop pretending that you can handle it, and just for this moment, at this time, bow your knee at the foot of the cross and give your life away. And as you do that, as you give your life away, then maybe these words start to make more and more sense. The one who tries to save his life will lose it, but the one who loses it for my sake will find it.